He boarded the return flight in silence, phone still buzzing with unread messages from HR. What they didn't know? The client sitting beside him wasn't just offering sympathy. He was holding a folder, a very specific folder. The plane was slicing through the night sky, turbulence matching the storm rising inside James Ortega's chest. He hadn't spoken since boarding. Row 14, window seat, aisle blocked by a man who wasn't just a client anymore. He was a witness to something that should have never happened in the first place. 3 hours earlier, James had been halfway through a quarterly strategy session in Sao Paulo. His presentation, clean, data-backed, forward-looking, had just wrapped when his company's client relationship manager file pinged open on his iPad with an unusual red flag. Assignment log revoked. He stared at the blinking notification, confused. His name had been removed from the project record entirely. No prior notice, no reason, no HR email in advance. Just gone. 2 minutes later, he received a second ping, a push alert from the internal travel record system. Reimbursement status, canceled. And then, a Teams call from a voice he hadn't heard since onboarding. Elaine, the HR lead with a sterile tone and a too-quick sign-off. James, your role has been dissolved effective immediately. Legal has determined your presence is no longer contractually required. Please return home as soon as possible. That was it. No thank you. No debrief, no handshake. They'd fired him mid-trip across international borders while representing the firm at a client's boardroom table, and they assumed he'd take it quietly. But what they didn't expect was that Daniel Peretti, the client's external counsel, seated across from James when it happened, had seen the whole thing play out, had heard the notification sounds, had glanced down at James's screen, and had frowned. 2 hours later, over espresso in the hotel's marble lobby, Daniel broke the silence. They removed you while you were here representing them, without warning? James could only nod. Apparently, I've breached some contract clause they won't name, or maybe I just cost less unemployed. Daniel leaned back slowly, reached into his briefcase, and pulled out a thick folder with a blue tab. They made a mistake, he said, voice low. A big one. And I think we both know which clause they forgot to read. James raised his brow. What's that? Clause 9.2, External Representative Indemnity. If your employment was terminated without cause during an active international assignment, and without 14 days' notice to the client, the contract's null. They breached their own agreement. A long silence stretched between them. Are you saying, James began. Daniel tapped the folder. I'm saying they just broke a multi-million-dollar service contract and will be arriving together. Back on the plane, the city lights blurred below as the reality set in. His firing wasn't just cold, it was negligent. And Daniel? He wasn't just being kind. He was building a case. And James had more than a front row seat. He had Exhibit A, the travel record screenshots, the HR call log, and a hard copy of the client relationship manager file showing the time-stamped deletion. 2 rows behind them, a former vendor from the same firm sat by chance. She had overheard just enough at the gate to glance twice in their direction. James caught her gaze. She nodded, slowly, like someone who'd seen this dance before, and never forgot the ending. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But what happened when they landed changed everything. You won't believe who was waiting at arrivals and what they were holding. The automatic doors parted with a hiss as James stepped into the terminal's fluorescent light. His hand still gripped the plane ticket stub like a lifeline. To his left, Daniel Peretti adjusted the folder under his arm with the precision of someone preparing for a deposition, not a casual walk through customs. What James didn't expect was the flash, then another, and another. 3 suited individuals stood just past the barrier. No name cards, no logos, just dark ties, clipped badges, and one handheld body cam aimed straight at them. The woman in the middle, tall, with the calm detachment of someone who knew more than she let on, nodded. James Ortega? She asked, as if she didn't already know. Yes? He said slowly, glancing at Daniel. The lawyer gave a subtle nod. Let her speak. I'm Officer Lena Madsen, Internal Affairs Liaison for Portico Partners. You're being asked to refrain from deleting or altering any digital records from the past 90 days. A data freeze has been issued following an alleged breach of Contract Clause 9.2 during an active client engagement. James blinked. She continued, tone cool as polished marble. We're not accusing you of anything. In fact, we believe you may be the injured party, but someone at your firm didn't read the assignment log carefully before triggering a mid-assignment termination. That's why we're here. From her blazer pocket, she pulled a sealed envelope. Thick, marked time-sensitive client relations. She handed it to Danielle. He didn't open it. Not yet. Two men behind her, both legal reps from the client's compliance division, stepped forward. One of them held up a USB drive, sealed and signed across the sticker. This contains the original meeting recording where the clause violation occurred. Your dismissal was verbalized on record while in client session, without any pre-briefing. That violates Section 12.1 of the engagement policy. It's documented, time-stamped, and confirmed. James felt a strange calm wash over him, the kind that comes after too many shocks, when your body stops reacting and your mind starts documenting. The kind of calm a chess player has when the last 3 moves are already locked. You said this wasn't an accusation, he said. Then what is it? The woman gave a tight smile. This is a heads up. We're about to send your firm a termination notice of our own. Daniel spoke next, quiet but cutting. We'll file it under material breach. The moment they let you go on foreign soil, they tore the contract in half. And worse, they did it in front of their highest value client. A pause. And we're not alone, Daniel added. There are 2 more clients who were watching the same call. Both reached out, both ready to sign affidavits. The air in the terminal shifted. What began as a personal ambush was rapidly becoming a corporate implosion. James stepped aside, trying to find footing in this surreal new narrative. The travel record app on his phone still read, "Return unverified." That digital ghost might now become one of the most valuable pieces of evidence in a high-stakes arbitration. Behind him, the vendor from the plane approached quietly. She handed over a napkin. "You don't know me," she said, "but I saw them do this to my colleague last year. Same clause, different name. No warning. I kept this." On the napkin, a printed timestamp of the internal Slack log showing a deletion of access at 3:04 p.m., the same moment James had been mid-presentation. He looked at it like a relic, like a breadcrumb, a trail, and now he wasn't following it alone. If you think HR stayed silent after this, you're wrong. But the email they sent next, it backfired hard. If this chapter made you pause, wait till you see what HR tries next. Stay with us. More shocks are coming. Drop your thoughts in the comments. James was still clutching the napkin when the email arrived. Subject: Immediate termination, compliance protocol reference. From HR-notification@porticopartners.com. Time: 5:41 a.m. It wasn't even signed with a name. Just a block of legalese, sterile as hospital light, packed with corporate euphemisms, departure due to strategic misalignment, reassignment of resource allocations, non-retroactive adjustment to compensation. No explanation, no apology. But one sentence stood out like blood on white linen. Any public or client-facing commentary related to this matter will be treated as grounds for forfeiture of pending benefits, in accordance with Section 14.3a. It was a mistake, a massive one, because that clause only applied to employees under active contract. And James wasn't one anymore. Daniel Peretti read the email over his shoulder, expression slowly tightening. "They sent this to your personal email?" James nodded. Not even through the secure portal, just a blast. Daniel tapped his phone, forward and methodical. This is coercion, thinly veiled, and they just left digital fingerprints all over it. Behind them, Lena from Internal Affairs had already seen the message. Her brows rose almost imperceptibly. "Section 14.3, she said softly. "It doesn't apply post-termination. They're bluffing, and that bluff is now part of the record." James let out a breath that trembled at the edges. He felt the fatigue begin to rise. Days of work, now layered with legal shockwaves. But he also felt something else stirring beneath it. Clarity. This wasn't personal. It was procedural, cold, calculated, and, if Daniel was right, legally flawed at multiple levels. Suddenly, the air buzzed again. A new message. Subject, follow-up, client escalation. From exec-office@porticopartners.com. Time, 5:44 a.m. Now this one was signed. By someone James hadn't spoken to in over a year, the VP of Global Delivery. It was short, almost nervous in tone. James, our apologies for the abruptness. We understand there's been some confusion. Please refrain from further action until we complete our internal review. You remain a valued member of the Portico community. Daniel laughed, a dry, incredulous sound. That's not an apology, that's panic. And then he said it, soft but sharp as broken glass. They realize the client's legal team flew with you, and now they're scrambling. That same moment, somewhere on the 36th floor of Portico HQ, a Slack thread exploded. An intern had flagged the travel record discrepancy. Another had noticed James's badge was still marked active. The CTO's assistant quietly created a new folder, Ortega Escalation, Legal. Inside it, someone began to drag documents. Too late, because James already had a digital breadcrumb trail, the deletion logs, the HR timestamps, the assignment log misfire, and now an email chain that showed both aggression and panic within 3 minutes of each other. Microcliffs were stacking into avalanches. And just as Daniel turned to James to suggest their next move, another message buzzed in, from someone unexpected. The client's CFO, subject. Can we talk? Not as Portico, as people. What the CFO confessed next. The call came at 6:02 a.m., no assistance, no scheduling buffer, just a direct line. James hesitated before answering, thumb hovering over the green icon. He glanced at Danielle. The lawyer gave a slight nod. Take it, he said, but don't promise a thing. Click. James Ortega speaking. A sigh came through the receiver, long, heavy, almost embarrassed. James, it's Marta Ruiz. She didn't introduce herself by title, didn't need to. He'd met Marta twice, once at the São Paulo pitch, once briefly in London. Sharp, composed, eyes that missed nothing. But now her voice carried a strain he hadn't heard before. I'm going to be blunt, she said. They looped us in late. We received the assignment log discrepancy just last night, well after your name had been wiped from the contract file. James closed his eyes. So they were trying to erase it retroactively. Marta continued. Our legal counsel flagged clause 9.2 and the travel breach before your plane even landed. And now the board's worried. James stayed silent. He knew better than to fill silence for them. I'm not supposed to be calling you, she added, but I need you to understand something, off the record. Pause. You weren't the first. That landed like a stone in the gut. There was another rep, New York-based, quiet removal, no justification provided. We only realized something was off when the client billing portal glitched and their name vanished mid-cycle. IT flagged it. Legal caught the breach, but by then the NDA had already been weaponized against the employee. James could feel Daniel's eyes on him. Marta kept going, voice softer now. They're using a loophole, James. Terminating employees mid-engagement, hiding the breach behind generic HR language, assuming the clients won't notice, or won't care. But Marta had cared, and apparently she wasn't alone. We have 3 contracts under review now, she said. If we confirm the pattern, our general counsel is recommending immediate suspension of all work streams with Portico partners. James exhaled slowly. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was rot in the ceiling beams. He leaned back against the airport bench, light from a vending machine blinking rhythmically nearby, the napkin in his pocket, the email on his screen, the folder in Daniel's hand. All the threads were starting to converge. I appreciate the call, James finally said, but you should know I'm not letting this get buried. Marta's reply was quiet. I don't think you can bury it anymore. James ended the call and looked at Daniel. She says it's a pattern. Multiple terminations, same clause, same method. Daniel was already typing. We need subpoenas, internal communication logs, full access to the HR decision matrix. If they've done this before, Portico doesn't just have a PR problem. They've got liability exposure across 3 regions. Just then, a new alert popped on James's screen. Subject: HR policy review, immediate staff session, required location. Zoom time, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. James stared at it. They're holding a meeting, he said. Damage control. Daniel nodded. Let them. Every word will be recorded, every contradiction archived. And then, another ping. The vendor from the plane, her email. Found it. Screenshot attached. Time-stamped access revocation. Hope it helps. One more breadcrumb. One step closer. The Zoom call was meant to clean things up, but someone forgot to disable the recording. At exactly 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Zoom room lit up with that familiar corporate chill. Muted mics, cameras off, and titles instead of names. VP_GD, HR_compliance, legal_review, and the one that made James pause. Exec_sponsor_renewals. Daniel sat beside him, laptop open, audio routed through a private earpiece. Record everything, he whispered. Screenshots too. Every second counts. James clicked join, but kept his camera off. No one had officially invited him. He had used a leftover link embedded in a CC from last month's assignment log sync. Their mistake. Again. The meeting opened with a clearing of throats and one of those over-rehearsed apologies that said a lot without saying anything. We want to acknowledge the internal confusion surrounding mid-engagement transitions, began the HR director. Our policies are under review and effective immediately. Clause references in field engagements will be streamlined. Streamlined? Daniel muted their audio and whispered. They're scrubbing the language. Retroactive narrative rewrite. But then, something cracked. Someone forgot their mic was still hot. A male voice, older, tired, maybe legal, cut in. This wouldn't be a fire drill if we hadn't terminated that guy mid-flight. Legal told them to wait, but global delivery rushed it. Silence. A quiet click as the mic finally cut. James stared at Daniel, whose eyes went wide. That's admissible, he said. They just admitted to premature termination in a recorded call. And speaking of that, another mistake. At the top left corner of the Zoom, a red dot glowed quietly, recording in progress. Not disabled, not paused, not hidden. The firm had just recorded its own confession. 10 minutes in, chaos began to bloom in the chat. One participant typed, "Wait, what clause is actually active right now? 9.2 or 14.3? Another added, "We used 14.3 on Ortega, but he was already out. That's not compliant, is it?" And then came the killer blow. A participant marked as compliance_lead_EMEA typed, "Ortega's client team sent notice this morning. They're terminating for breach. We just lost a $12.4 million account." You could almost hear the oxygen leave the room. Suddenly, boxes began disappearing, participants dropping off one by one, a click, a shuffle, a frantic rewording of an already doomed narrative. James sat still, watching it all collapse in real time. Then came the final flourish. A private message popped up in the chat, sent to legal_review, but visible for a fraction of a second before vanishing. Delete the Slack threads. Start with his badge log. Daniel had already taken the screenshot. Outside the glass-paneled conference room where they were watching, the sky had turned overcast, the kind of heavy gray that feels like it's holding its breath. James looked at Daniel. They're in full erase mode. Daniel closed his laptop. Good. Let them try. Every attempt to cover this up makes the fire trail longer. James's phone buzzed again. A new sender. Subject: Whistleblower Protocol. Confidential discussion. Invitation from legal.compliance@govwatch.org. The noose was tightening, but not on James. Someone just stepped in from the outside. And they don't answer to Portico's board. The email was short. Just a few lines, no logos, no frills. We've been following recent escalations at Portico Partners. You may qualify for protection under the Global Compliance Whistleblower Act. Confidential discussion, no obligation, no disclosure without consent. Respond only if interested. It came from a .org domain James didn't recognize, but Daniel did. That's legit, he said immediately. Government adjacent, but not official. Think watchdog with teeth. They work with multi-jurisdictional cases, especially when corporate retaliation crosses international lines. James hesitated. He had already crossed invisible lines this week, from employee to liability, from representative to witness. Now they were offering a lifeline, but it came with shadows. No badge, no clear jurisdiction. Just reach. Daniel leaned forward. You don't need to whistleblow. You already are. The second they used that clause on you mid-trip, they made you the story. James stared at the screen, then typed one word. Available. 30 minutes later, a secure link arrived. The interface was sterile. No names, just initials. A J on the other end. Voice only. The agent's tone was clean, professional, too calm for what she was saying. We've been tracking behavior patterns inside Portico since Q4 of last year, she said. 12 flagged terminations, 3 involving international travel, 1 involving sudden retraction of health benefits during an appeal window. Yours, however, is the first with client witnesses. James said nothing, but his stomach turned. AJ continued. We're not investigating your behavior, Mr. Ortega. We're documenting theirs. And based on the evidence already in the open, Zoom logs, Slack screenshots, the assignment log rollback, you're no longer a bystander. Daniel broke in, measured and slow. Are you offering protection? AJ didn't pause. Yes. If Mr. Ortega agrees to testify, and if he's willing to submit the client relationship manager file unaltered, we can escalate. James leaned back in his chair, staring at the cheap acoustic tiles of the office Daniel had borrowed. He wasn't just up against HR now. This was structural. Testify against them? He asked, voice steady. A J's response was quiet. No, for everyone else they did this too. Meanwhile, inside Portico headquarters, the damage spread like fire under glass. A junior compliance analyst had connected the dots between badge deactivations and the global assignment log revisions. The numbers didn't match. Too many employees removed mid-cycle. Too many overlaps with client complaints. And in a locked conference room, 2 executives whispered over a printed report marked Priority Audit Risk. Page 3 held a name neither had expected, James Ortega. Status, inactive. Next to it, a flagged comment in red font, escalation risk, recordings exist, CFOS involved. The director slammed the folder shut. We need this buried before Q2 disclosure. But the problem was already airborne. That evening, James sat alone in Daniel's office, phone dark, inbox humming. One email remained unopened, from his former manager. Subject, I didn't know. He didn't click it. Instead, he opened a blank document and began typing. Header, personal timeline of events attachments, travel record, HR emails, Zoom transcript, napkin scan. He wasn't writing it for himself anymore. He was writing for everyone who never got this far. But just as he hit save, the internal archive updated, and a deleted file reappeared. It blinked into existence like a ghost. Ortega_CRM_audit_V 3-final.pdf. Timestamped 3 days after James had been terminated. Authored by someone he'd never worked with. James froze. Daniel looked over his shoulder. That was scrubbed. I checked the metadata yesterday. This file wasn't there. James opened it. The document was clean. Too clean. No edit history, no comments, just an executive-style summary of James's role in the São Paulo assignment, with a twist. The narrative had changed. He wasn't listed as lead consultant anymore. He was demoted to support liaison. His contributions were rewritten. And in the section marked Engagement Outcome, the summary read, Client relationship intact. Minor communication disruption due to resource confusion. Incident resolved internally. James leaned back slowly. They're rewriting history. Daniel nodded grimly. It's the digital equivalent of forging a witness statement. And worse, this version postdates your termination, meaning they altered official client records retroactively. The implications were nuclear. James scrolled further, finding a new section added at the end. Section 5.1, Termination Justification. It claimed he had breached internal confidentiality protocols by discussing internal workflows during a client presentation. James remembered that meeting. It was about onboarding efficiency. He had shown a slide, greenlit by the project manager, on task pipelines. Nothing proprietary, nothing hidden. They're framing a policy breach, he said. Daniel tapped his phone, calling up an older version of the same file from a synced backup. The original slide was there, date stamped, with approval markup. Caught, Daniel muttered. Red-handed. They're building a false backstory after the legal threats started. That's obstruction. Then his phone buzzed again. From legal.compliance@govwatch.org. Subject: Update additional testimonies received. James opened the forwarded attachment. 4 former employees, different countries, same termination pattern, all within the past year. One of them had even filed a private arbitration and was silenced via NDA. Another had tried to sue, but lacked evidence. A third had gone dark after a sudden non-compete clause was enforced retroactively. But now they were speaking, because of James. That afternoon, Daniel scheduled a notarized upload of all evidence to a secured chain of custody archive, client relationship manager file, assignment log entries, the napkin, the travel timestamps, and now the fabricated audit file, all traceable, all damning. "You're not a whistleblower anymore," Daniel said, his tone unreadable. "You're a precedent." James didn't answer. He was staring at the last line of the newly appeared file. Reviewed and approved by T. Novak, Chief Client Officer, Tanya Novak, the woman who'd hired him. That evening, his phone buzzed again. This time, the message was just 4 words. "I need to explain." T. But when Tanya finally spoke, she didn't explain anything. She confessed. James didn't answer her message right away. He paced, thought, reread it 3 times. Tanya Novak had once been his fiercest advocate, the one who pushed for his assignment in Sao Paulo, who vouched for him when he took over the faltering client portfolio, who once told him over a late-night coffee that the best consultants are the ones who quietly make other people look smart. Now, her name was stamped at the bottom of a falsified document. When he finally replied, he didn't write a greeting, just, "You said you needed to explain." She called. No video, just audio. Her voice sounded different, frayed, like a violin string wound too tight. "I didn't authorize that file," she began. "I need you to know that." James said nothing. Let her hang in it. "I saw it appear in the archive 2 hours ago. My name was on it. I didn't touch it." "You're the chief client officer," James said flat. "You don't need to touch it to approve it. Just nod in a meeting or stay silent when it goes out." A pause. Then Tanya exhaled and her voice dropped. "I tried to stop it. But by the time legal and ops got involved, it was already circulating internally. They said if I didn't sign off, it would look like I wasn't aligned with executive leadership. They would have written me out next." James closed his eyes. "Is that what happened to Lena? From HR?" Silence. Tanya whispered, "She resigned last night." The weight of it all crept in like fog, slow, saturating everything. "I brought you into that assignment," she said. "I knew you could handle it. I wanted them to see what you could do, and you did, better than anyone expected." James's jaw tightened. "And they rewarded me by deleting my badge mid-presentation." "I didn't know," Tanya repeated. "Not until it was done. They locked me out of the reassignment portal. When I asked why, they said conflict exposure and told me to move on." Another breath. Shallower now. "There's one more thing." James turned, signaling Daniel to start recording silently. "They're planning to issue a revised contract to the client," Tanya said. "A backdated version, one that removes your name entirely. They think if they overwrite the client archive before legal files breach charges, they can deny any wrongdoing. Say the client misremembered." "That's document tampering," James said. "That's felony territory." "I know," she whispered. "Why are you telling me?" And finally, her voice cracked. "Because I won't survive this machine twice." Later that night, Daniel sent a secure package to the watchdog agency. It included the recorded call, Tanya's confession, her metadata trail, her email header, and a note. Key witness, willing, but scared. The response was near instant. We'll protect her. She just changed the trajectory of the case. James sat alone after Daniel left. The office lights dimmed on auto timer. Only the blue LED from the screen cast a glow over the desk. He pulled out the napkin again. The first breadcrumb. Then he stared at the newest file, the fabricated CRM audit, and at Tanya's name beneath it. He didn't feel anger. He felt momentum. What they tried to erase had become a paper trail, and every trail leads somewhere. But the next morning, the firm made one final move. And this time, it hit the headlines. James hadn't even opened his laptop yet when his phone started lighting up. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Messages from former colleagues, clients, even a university professor he hadn't spoken to in a decade. And then came the first screenshot. Breaking. Portico Partners faces legal action over flight terminations. Financial Herald, 7:02 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Right beneath the headline, a photo of James stepping off the plane next to Daniel Peretti. The image was slightly blurred, taken from across the arrivals hall, but there was no mistaking the folder Daniel held or the exhaustion on James's face. The subheader made it worse for the firm. Internal sources confirm a series of mid-assignment firings tied to contract manipulation and client deception. Watchdog agencies now involved. Whistleblower protected under Global Compliance Act. Daniel stepped into the office seconds later, holding 2 coffees and a copy of the Times folded under his arm. They thought they were scrubbing a mess, he said. Turns out they were writing the press release themselves. An hour later, the dominoes fell faster than expected. Portico's general counsel resigned. Tanya Novak was placed on administrative leave, voluntarily, but with full legal protection. 3 clients suspended their contracts within the day, and by 3 p.m., the SEC issued a brief statement, investigating potential patterns of fraudulent corporate disclosures and retaliatory HR practices. They didn't mention Portico by name, but they didn't have to. That evening, another email appeared in James's inbox, from an address ending in at financewatch.org. Your timeline is now the official sequence in our case brief. You've triggered the fastest internal audit we've ever seen. Daniel paced behind him, phone glued to his ear, coordinating with legal teams in 3 time zones. They'll fight, but they'll settle. They don't want discovery. Too many email threads, too many Slack logs. James nodded absently. He wasn't thinking about the firm anymore. He was thinking about the people who had messaged him since the story broke. Employees who had disappeared without notice, contractors whose names were erased from project histories. A woman from Chile who said her badge deactivated during a client call, and she was later accused of ghosting. They were all real now, and none of them were silent anymore. That night, a new article dropped. The flight termination files, how a napkin, a Zoom call, and a legal folder brought down a giant. James didn't share it. He just read the closing paragraph over and over again. James Ortega never sought revenge. He sought a record, and that record might be what saves hundreds more. But before the ink dried, a sealed envelope arrived from someone no one expected to speak again. It arrived by courier. No return address, no sender name, just James's full name in clean block lettering and a firm seal pressed into the back flap. Deep red, matte, unmistakably deliberate. Daniel held it up to the light. Not government, not internal legal. Then his brow furrowed. This looks private. James peeled the flap carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, heavy stock, hand-signed. James, you don't know me directly, but I once signed off on your promotion. I'm writing not as a former executive, but as someone who also watched them try to erase me. There's one more document you haven't seen. It was created 3 weeks before your termination. Check the metadata folder called prep_doc:_Q2_realignments. You were never a mistake. You were a strategy. No signature. But at the bottom, scribbled in pen, do not trust the archive timestamp. It's been scrubbed. Trust the internal version log. Daniel didn't wait. He opened the secure backup and searched the directory. There it was. Prep_doc. Q2_ realignments created 5 weeks ago, modified 4 days ago, and in the version history, an entry flagged Ortega removal proposal, draft only. It wasn't a reaction. It was a plan. His termination had been drafted before his Sao Paulo flight, before any alleged clause breach, before the Zoom. Daniel's face hardened. This proves they didn't respond to a mistake. They manufactured one. To justify a headcount purge after securing Q1 client renewals. James sat very still. He wasn't collateral. He was cover. By midnight, the envelope, the document, and the metadata had been uploaded into the global whistleblower archive and distributed, decentralized, immutable. There would be no more rewrites, no more erasures, no more whispered removals at 36,000 feet. 1 month later, a formal statement hit every major outlet. Portico Partners, under regulatory investigation, has reached settlement agreements with 5 former employees. Further hearings are pending. And buried in the fine print, compliance structures are being overhauled in cooperation with an independent oversight board. Recommendations provided by former consultant James Ortega. He never asked to become a name people whispered in legal briefings, but when systems rot in silence, sometimes it takes a napkin, a folder, and someone willing to speak after they were told to disappear. They fired him mid-trip, but when he landed, he wasn't just an ex-employee. He was evidence.